Hello everyone and welcome back to Red Room Stories. I know many of you tune into these tales to help you drift off to sleep. So before we settle in, I'd love for each of you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. The clock ticked louder in the small apartment, a relentless reminder of the hours slipping away as May stared at the cracked wall beside her. The sound echoed, merging with the hum of the heater, creating a cacophony that vibrated with an unnerving energy. Beneath her desk, a half-burnt candle flickered ominously, casting shadows that danced like lost souls, twisting and merging in ways that made her heart race. She dismissed her unease, clutching her laptop tighter, convinced that a couple of late-night deadlines were to blame for her heightened senses. The project, a documentary on urban legends, had her combing through the dark corners of the internet, immersing herself in stories that spoke of curses and hauntings, breeding seeds of doubt that now stirred restlessly in the back of her mind. She dug deeper into her research. She stumbled upon a particularly sinister account. In the forgotten alleys of Marrow Street, beneath the neon glow of evening lights, lay a derelict building known as the Watcher's Hold. It was said that those who ventured inside were followed, not by the ghosts of the past, but by something far more malevolent. May's fingers tingled, a rush of adrenaline pushing her toward an unsettling curiosity. The building was just a punk's playground, a challenge for thrill seekers. Yet something about it whispered to her, luring her in, deeper. The next night, fueled by caffeine and a desperate need for authenticity in her project, she gathered her equipment and made plans to explore. The air outside was sharp, a crisp reminder that fall had turned to winter. May wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck, her breath visible in the cold, but her determination warmed her chest. The journey to Marrow Street felt longer in the dark, each step punctuated by the crunch of gravel beneath her feet, the city around her eerily quiet. Familiar sounds, a distant siren, the buzz of a street lamp, felt muffled, drowned by her growing anxiety. She paused outside the Watcher's Hold, its facade crumbling like a forgotten memory. Windows like hollow eyes watching her from the shadows. With a deep breath, she stepped inside, the door creaking ominously, a natural portent of the horrors that awaited. Inside was a sepulcher of despair, littered with debris that crunched underfoot. A once vibrant mural peeled away from the wall, revealing layers of graffiti and neglect. The stale, musky scent of decay wrapped around her, and she flicked on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom like a knife, revealing long-forgotten relics and a scuttling of small creatures that vanished at her intrusion. Something shifted in her chest, a mounting dread that unfurled with each step deeper into the building. Walls whispered memories, and the shadows seemed to breathe, their edges curling toward her like tendrils. As she explored, the air grew heavy, cloying, almost sentient, suffocating her thoughts. She carefully ascended a staircase, each creak a reminder of the past, leading her to the second floor where a chill gripped her spine. A doorway opened into a room adorned with tattered curtains that swayed leadenly despite the absence of wind. The flashlight beam fell on a dusty mirror, its surface reflective but strangely opaque. She moved closer, entranced by her own wariness. Yet as she stared, the reflection morphed, the flicker of something dark swirling behind her, just out of view. Her heart thundered, spurred by an instinctive panic she could neither understand nor dismiss. May turned sharply, desperate to shake off the feeling of being watched. The space was empty, yet the silence felt alive, thick with anticipation. As she continued her exploration, strange occurrences began to unfold. Soft whispers just beyond earshot, shadows that darted to the edges of her vision, the ghost of a chill that crept down her spine. Each incident tightened the coil of dread, until she found herself questioning her own mind, each heartbeat echoing louder as she approached the heart of the building, an old chapel frozen in time. The dusty pews stood like sentinels, remnants of lost faith haunting the space. But the real threat lay within the walls. The dark secrets of the Watcher's hold seeped through the dim light, the air heavy with the weight of the past. A sense of accusation began to take form, as if the very foundation of the building held grudges that reached out to ensnare her. She discovered remnants of strange symbols etched into the walls, their meaning lost, yet weighed down with malice. The altar, overgrown with mold, was stark and foreboding, a lure for sacrificial memories that pressed at the edges of her consciousness. The floorboards creaked under her trembling weight, and the stale air pressed in, thickening with dread. In an impulse driven by fleeting rationality, she turned to leave, but the shadows shifted violently, blocking her path. May's breath quickened as she stumbled back, a scream caught in her throat. Each step away felt like walking on a tightrope stretched across an abyss. She tried to rationalize the vision that gripped her, glimpses of those who had been consumed by the place, faces twisted in agony, eyes wide in horrified recognition. Here, they were trapped, mere echoes of despair waiting for the next soul to succumb to the darkness ingrained in the building's bones. Panic clawed at her throat as she raced back toward the staircase, yet each turn felt warped, leading her deeper into a labyrinth of layers she could not comprehend. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that called her name, urging her to remain, pulling at her very essence. Outside, the snow began to fall, blanketing the city in a deceptive innocence. But in this forgotten space, the chaos twisted, tighter. May slammed through door after door, visions chasing her, shadows melding with the architecture itself, and a realization ignited deep within her. The Watcher was never just a story. It had a hunger. It craved souls. With a surge of adrenaline, she stumbled through the crumbling doorway, thrusting her way outside into the freshly fallen snow. The cold bit into her skin, but the suffocating grip of the building loosened at last. She collapsed onto the streets, gasping, her breath misting in the air. But the trauma remained taut, scars forming beneath her skin, a mark of her experience. In the distance, the city continued to thrive, unaware of the malevolence that lurked just a heartbeat away. As she looked back toward the Watcher's hold, she saw it then, a silhouette at the window, an outline that held a smirk, a lure pulling at her sanity. The fire in her heart battled against the chill of despair, but deep down, she felt the echo of its whispers. The click of the door, once closed, now stood ajar behind her, a promise laced with danger, and for a brief moment, doubt unfurled in her mind, flee or return. The choice teetered perilously in her hands. May stumbled to her feet, pivoting toward the chaos of her surroundings, knowing that this life could still be hers, but something within her crackled with recognition. The horror wasn't in the building. It was within her now. While her body escaped, a part of her remained entwined with the darkness, a nameless seed planted deep in her mind. As she walked away, head pounding and heart racing, she understood that some stories were never truly over. Some legends became embedded in the soul, transforming into a never-ending nightmare echoing with every tick of that relentless clock. The smell of damp earth clung in the air as Sarah trudged down the narrow trail, the damp leaves cushioning each step like a thick, suffocating carpet. It had rained the night before, and the forest breathed heavily around her, a looming presence that played tricks on her mind. Something was different this time. The trees seemed to twist and bend as if they were alive, watching her as she ventured deeper into the suffocating embrace of their shadows. Each creak of a branch echoed with an unsettling familiarity, a reminder of her childhood fears that had somehow been buried under the weight of adulthood. Years had passed since she last walked through Lost Hollow, a secluded patch of forest, rumored to carry whispers of something ancient and dark, tales that resided only in the nightmares of her youth. Yet here she was, back with memories that tugged at her like a rotting specter. The aura of the woods had turned grotesquely stirring, an invitation laced with foreboding that unearthed a sickening curiosity within her. The sense of being watched pricked at the nape of her neck, but she pressed on, determined to confront or perhaps ignore the shadows that had haunted her family for generations. As the path narrowed, it twisted like a serpent, limbs clawing at her clothes, pulling her in. The breeze, sharp with a chill, carried an echo of distant, muffled voices that made her skin crawl. Instinctively, she reached for her phone, only to find it had lost signal as it often did in these woods. Frustration mixed with a growing sense of isolation. The thought of turning back flickered momentarily before she felt a surge of anger rise. She wouldn't let herself succumb to fear, a coward's choice. She stepped deliberately, the underbrush crackling sinisterly beneath her feet. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah stumbled upon a clearing that opened into a small, twisted glade. Here the light was thick and distorted. Shadows danced in the haze like phantoms waiting for dusk. In the center of the clearing lay a decayed stump, its surface marred by rivulets of darkened sap that gleamed like congealing blood. Something about it pulled her closer, a morbid curiosity overpowering her better judgment. Kneeling, she brushed her fingers against the bark, its clammy texture sending repulsion through her fingertips. But she felt compelled, as if the stump beckoned her to listen, to understand. As night fell like a suffocating blanket, the forest transformed. The air crackled with energy, thick and heavy, loaded with an unspeakable dread. The distant murmurs grew closer, swirling around her like a spectral choir chanting her name. Loneliness gnawed at her resolve, and she closed her eyes, willing the voices away. But they thrummed within her, a drumming that ensnared her heart and quickened her pulse. She stumbled back, breathless, as shapes shifted just beyond the trees, amorphous forms that seemed to swell and recede in the dark. Then she heard laughter, a soft, childlike sound that pricked her skin with terror. It wasn't a figment. It was there, taunting her from the deeper shadows. Memories of her brother played through her mind, the stories he carved from the very essence of those woods, whispers of creatures and curses wrapped in playful words. She had dismissed them all those years ago, but now the past surged back, twisting her mind with a venomous embrace. Each thought of him turned the laughter menacing, and her fleeting sanity grasped at the edges as she spun to face the sound. The darkness encroached, and a cold breeze whipped through the trees, carrying with it something sickly sweet rotting. A surge of terror spiraled within her as she stumbled backwards. She could feel the earth shift beneath her, unstable and alive. The darkness folded into itself, revealing a familiar figure clothed in shadows. Her brother, with hollow eyes and a smile devoid of warmth, beckoning her from the depths. She couldn't move. Rooted by dread, as her world spiraled into unfamiliar chaos. Instinctively, she sprinted, her heart pounding like a war drum, branches lashing at her face, pulling at her hair. The whispers festered around her, a cacophony of memories and fears colliding. Each estimated footfall echoed her name, a cruel symphony wrapping tighter around her mind. She could almost feel his presence behind her, sweet and suffocating. It chased her deeper and deeper into the heart of the forest's suffocation. Then she saw it, a haunting glow through the canopy, a luminescence that felt unnaturally inviting. Hope surged as she sprinted toward it, believing she might escape the demons of her past, only to find herself at the very stump that had ensnared her earlier. The light pulsed, a beckoning heart throbbing within the lifeless bark. Confused and exhausted, she collapsed to her knees, the acrid scent of decay filling her lungs as the whispers grew louder, circling like vultures above freshly killed prey. "Join us," they sang, their voices sweet and oily. It was a chorus of children, her brother's laughter intertwining with theirs, wrapping her in an embrace of nostalgia edged with horror. She clutched her chest where a hot ache blossomed, her own heartbeat drumming with a rhythm that felt foreign. The ground beneath her shifted again, and she felt roots rising and curling around her ankles like serpents. Panic flooded her veins, and she wrenched back against their pull, desperate for release, desperate for distance. As the roots tightened, the glow of the stump intensified, blinding her as the world dissolved into fragmented shapes and colors. Memories enveloped her, lost breezes, echoes of laughter, the warmth of her brother's arms, all twisting into a cacophony of love and regret. It was intoxicating, pulling her into a gentle depths. She placed her hands against the cold bark, her fingers sinking into it as if welcomed back by an old friend. The laughter morphed, became sinister, revealing a world beyond comprehension. In that moment, she understood. The forest wasn't a place to remember. It was a trap woven from her past, her brother entwined forever within its hungry roots. As Sarah sunk deeper into its dark embrace, the last sounds of the world beyond faded away, leaving only the whispers of her lost joys and fears flooding through her mind. She had become a part of this wretched cycle, the forest claiming another soul to fuel its never-ending hunger. The moon rose high above Lost Hollow, casting an unnatural glow on the clearing, while the wood stood silent, satisfied. There was no escaping the depths of their haunted history, for within the murmur of leaves one could always hear her laughter joining the chorus, a darkness entwined with beloved memories forever lost beneath the cold earth. In the heart of a decaying urban sprawl, where the shadows of abandoned buildings swallowed the light of day, Lydia had always felt a pull towards an old, neglected library, a skeletal structure dwarfed by the steel giants of the city. The sign, above the gaping entrance, had long since fallen, leaving only the faintest impression of letters, the name of the library lost to time and neglect. As a child, Lydia used to pass it on her way to school. Its crumbling facade and broken windows called to her, whispering secrets of a past life. Now at 28, after losing her job and with few ties left, she ventured inside, driven by a sense of unfinished business and an unquenchable thirst for discovery. The air within was stale, heavy with the scent of mold and dust, and the floor creaked beneath her hesitant steps. Sunlight filtered weakly through the grime-covered windows, illuminating motes of dust that hung like spirits in the suffocating silence. Rows upon rows of shelves stretched into the shadows, wine-dark, wood and faded leather whispering of knowledge gone awry, collapsing into the past. It was here, among the forgotten volumes and cracked leather bindings, that Lydia felt a shudder ripple along her spine. Something was not right. As she wandered deeper into the labyrinth of shelves, an icy draft snaked around her, a chill that felt alive, like fingers trailing over her skin. She paused beside an ancient tome titled The Vanished, its spine cracked like an old man's gnarled hands. Pulling it free, she was rewarded with the sweet scent of aged paper that masked something foul just beneath the surface. As she flipped through the pages, images of abandoned towns, anguished faces, and haunting whispers leaped out at her, unsettling illustrations that seemed to flicker under her gaze, as if they were alive, begging to be seen. Her heart raced as she skimmed over an account of tragic disappearances connected by a series of cryptic symbols and unsettling dreams shared by the victims. The descriptions echoed disturbing memories from her childhood: a friend lost in the woods, a family member slipping further into madness, moments she had buried deep, wrapped tightly with guilt and confusion. The tension in the air thickened as she noticed a familiar symbol shimmering on the page, the same one that had painted the walls of her youth, always watching from the edges of her vision. Driven by an inexplicable urgency, Lydia pressed deeper into the library, the layout shifting, as if the books were rearranging themselves to keep her from the door. The silence grew oppressive. Doorways emerged from the walls, and the dimness warped her sense of direction. Ghostly echoes began to curl around her, snippets of laughter and cries reverberating off the dusty walls, and the air grew dense, thick, enough to taste. The sky outside was bleeding into night, shadowy forms embracing the city in darkness. It was then that she stumbled upon a hidden alcove, a small reading nook that felt removed from time itself. Here the air shifted once more, the whispers turning to a syncopated hum, drawing her in like a cruel puppet. In the center rested a circle of symbols carved into the wood, their jagged edges etched with a darkness that seemed to seep from her trembling fingers as she traced them. Each touch felt electric, igniting a flicker of clarity amid the chaos swirling in her mind. Lydia, driven by curiosity and desperation, felt the chilling grip of a forgotten memory claw its way to the surface. Her friend had vanished while playing a game near that very library. With a gasp, she realized each of the symbols matched those found in the tome. The hum crescendoed, rising and curling around her thoughts, urging her to connect the dots, to understand the pattern beneath the madness. Shadows in the corners twisted, and the weight of unseen eyes pressed against her back. The library's heartbeat quickened, a pulsing rhythm that synchronized with her own. The walls began to shake. Books rained from the shelves, some tearing from their bindings, pages fluttering like distressed birds. As the symbols glowed beneath her fingers, she could feel the air thickening, existence folding in upon itself. The whispering crescendo morphed into anguished wails, a collective lament of those who had walked this path before her. Panic surged through her. With each heartbeat, she felt more entwined with the library's dark reasoning, its desperate hunger for understanding, for recognition. In that chaotic whirlwind, Lydia caught fragments of a narrative. The library was a collector, a vessel for lost souls who fell into its embrace, never to emerge. Everything she had ever known, every fear, regret, and loss, flowed through her like an unrelenting tide. Her childhood friend, a fleeting memory now, had become part of the very fabric of this place, woven into the shadows that engulfed her. Lydia's heart sank as the realization dawned. The library bore no benevolence. It existed as both prison and predator. As the lights flickered erratically, igniting moments of clarity amidst the chaos, Lydia felt the tether of her identity slipping away, the very essence of who she was dissolving into the fog. The library had her in its grip, consuming her past, her memories, feasting on her sorrow. She recoiled from the wall, breath hitching, but the space behind her was gone, replaced with an endless chasm of darkness where whispers merged into horrifying laughter. In the last flicker of light, she clung to the tome, its pages whispering her name, beckoning her to read aloud, to join the dance of madness. The symbols twisted in her mind, each one a gateway to another life, another fate. And as she opened her mouth, her voice fleshed out the shadows, binding her to the library's unholy lore. Reality splintered as her screams were devoured by the darkness, swallowed whole by the very place she sought refuge. Outside, the city continued oblivious, its heart palpitating under the weight of countless lives, unaware of the horror that lay beneath its feet. The library remained, a looming presence, waiting for the next lost soul to wander through its door. And within, Lydia fused with the darkness, her laughter now echoing through the aisles, becoming one with the shadows, forever watching for the next curious heart to step inside and seal their fate. The town of Eldridge had long been shrouded in mystery, where the lines between reality and nightmare blurred under the creeping shadows of its trees. Rachel Lewis, a history teacher in her late 30s, had recently moved there, drawn by the quaint allure of the countryside and the promise of a fresh start following her divorce. But there was an unsettling quality to Eldridge. The air was thick with an unsettling hush, as if the town itself held its breath, waiting for something to happen. As Rachel walked through the narrow cobblestone streets, the whispers of the past brushed against her skin like a chill wind, hinting at lingering secrets lost to time. In her first week, Rachel stumbled upon an old library, its doors creaking, open like a long-forgotten chest of memories. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that filtered through grimy windows, illuminating rows of aging books that seemed to breathe stories of their own. Among them lay a peculiar journal bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting, frantic and chaotic, chronicled strange occurrences in Eldridge. Objects moving when eyes were turned, shadows flitting just out of sight, and the inexplicable disappearance of residents on stormy nights. Intrigued yet unnerved, Rachel felt an irresistible urge to uncover the truth behind these ink-stained lines. Days turned into nights filled with restless sleep, each fading day haunted by the journal's revelations. Rachel pored over the town's history, discovering that Eldridge had once been a thriving community, but something sinister had shifted over the decades. Unexplained tragedies clustered around a solitary hill on the outskirts, the Bellwood Mound, the site of ancient rituals and whispered tales of the unnatural. The locals, with their knowing glances and hushed voices, seemed to fabricate a protective barrier, shunning any talk of the mound lest forgotten horrors be awakened. As she explored the town, Rachel began to notice subtle changes around her. The faces of her students took on a pallid hue, their eyes reflecting a hollow fear that unnerved her. Flickering lights cast long, disjointed shadows in her classroom, and the whispers of the past echoed in the spaces between words as if the spirits trapped within the walls were trying to communicate, clawing for her attention. On each evening walk home, the shadows lurking in the corners of her vision grew more pronounced, their movements unnervingly synchronized with her own. The once charming scenic path had transformed into a corridor of dread. Emboldened and terrified, Rachel decided to visit the Bellwood Mound, a decision that felt as natural as breathing but swirled with foreboding. The afternoon sun slipped behind a bank of gray clouds, a foreboding omen she dismissed too easily. As she hiked up the steep incline, the air turned thick with the scent of wet earth, and a disquieting stillness enveloped her like an old shroud. Upon reaching the summit, she was struck by the sight. Not a simple mound, but a complex arrangement of ancient stones, adorned with unknown symbols, carved deeply into the surface. weathered yet vibrant, as if echoing the heartbeat of the earth itself. It was there, amidst the stones, that the atmosphere shifted irrevocably. A sudden gust of wind gutted through the clearing, carrying with it whispers that transcended language, pleas for help, curses woven together in the melodic tones of long-lost voices. Rachel shuddered, pulling her jacket tighter against her body, yet something compelled her to stand still, rooted to that very spot. She could feel the sensation of eyes upon her, unseen yet palpable, gauging her reaction to the grotesque intimacy of its history. The stones seemed to pulse, their energy palpable as the day faded into the oppressive blanket of night. That night, sleep evaded her again, and she became consumed by visions. Images of townsfolk, their faces twisted in anguish, danced before her closed eyelids. They screamed in silence, mouths stretched wide yet soundless. Shadows coiled around her in her dreams, twining tighter with each frantic heartbeat until she awoke gasping, drenched in sweat. The journal lay on her bedside table, open to a page that bled with warnings, each line heavier than the last. Panic surged as she processed the strangeness of her surroundings. The shadows in her room had grown bolder, hinting at sentience, writhing like smoke given form. Determined not to be consumed by the madness creeping into her life, Rachel sought the townsfolk's counsel. Yet every attempt to engage them was met with growing resistance, a collective denial, their faces blank, eyes darting away as if the mere mention of the mound could spark an eruption they had long buried. When she pressed further, accusing, glances fell on her, an unspoken fear fueling their silence. Paranoia began to creep into her thoughts. She felt like an intruder in a play whose script was written long before her arrival. Time began to spiral, each day overlapping with the next like a film stuck in a loop. As Rachel descended further into the well of dread, she noticed strange occurrences. Objects in her home shifted inexplicably, and her reflection in the mirror began to deviate, a ghostly doppelganger mimicking her movements with a chilling, a sense of urgency consumed her. She had to confront the truth of the mound and the town's chaotic past before it consumed her entirely. Returning to the mound once more, desperate and frantic, Rachel felt drawn into the energy that hummed beneath the ancient stones. The whispers grew louder, defining themselves into words, pleading for liberation. What had once felt like a natural dread transformed into a suffocating desperation, as if the very earth beneath her feet sought to pull her down, ensnare her with its dark history. With trembling hands, she traced the symbols carved into the stones, feeling a jolt that coursed through her like electricity. And then she saw it, the truth that lay beneath the surface, tangled in the roots of Eldridge's dark heart. The townsfolk had not merely vanished. They had been offered up, sacrifices to appease the hungry spirits confined within the earth, a rhythm of horror pulsing through the cycles of time. In that horrifying realization, Rachel understood. She was the latest offering, the fresh face, in a history of despair, and her past had led her directly into the maw of the beast. As dread washed over her, she turned to flee, but the ground trembled beneath her, the stones shifting with a life of their own. Shadows curled around her, enveloping her in a veil of despair. Unable to see anything but the encroaching darkness, Rachel staggered back, hands grasping wildly for support. Fear clawed at her throat, choking her as the spirits manifesting from the ground grasped her, cold and uncompromising, dragging her down into their eternal cycle. The last thing Rachel heard was the echoing scream of her own voice, swallowed by the earth, and the distant murmurs of Eldridge swirling through the night. As the sun rose the next day, the town remained unchanged. the cobblestone streets still echoing with the weight of time. But in the old library, the journal sat closed, dust settling over it like a forgotten memory, waiting patiently for the next curious soul to unearth the horrific legacy hidden within Eldridge's bowels.